Clive, can you start? I mean, we need to introduce ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Clive Jordan. It says Clive Plannerly Jordan. Um, my whole philosophy in AEC, I've been in it for 30 years. I've had the pleasure of being an architect, an engineer, a contractor, an owner, and twice had the opportunity to be inside of an AEC BIM-based startup, a software company. And having worked for four of the software companies, the big and the small startups. I love building code that helps our industry become more efficient. And Plannerly, that's our job, is to create software that helps BIM teams, helps project management teams to plan early and to have fun doing it. I'm Clive.
Akash, your turn.
Yeah, I'm Ákos. I'm Ákos. I'm an architect, but I never ended up being a designing architect. I early enough in my career, I found myself on the software side of things. But since I'm not a developer, I was joining software companies for doing services, and I even had the nice experience of running a services team with about 100 people for global services back in the early years. Well, not the early years of BIM, because that goes back 30 years now. I'm not that old, but still, when we were doing modeling, we had to do that because we had a beautiful software solution, Vico Software, which was a first integrated model-based project scheduling and estimating tool, but there were no good models to run that tool on. So we were putting together those models. So that's where actually I met Clive. Now goes back a couple of years. And I had the opportunity to visit different places in the world, to work on beautiful projects all around the world. And then I found myself facing a challenge that was about 8 years ago, running into a problem which was level of detail, level of development, whatever we want to call it, the LOD thingy. And I just found that people are trying to redefine, and that's pretty much the nature of our topic of building information modeling in general. Lots of people are trying to find solutions for the same problem in different small isolated bubbles, and that just cannot happen. And that's when I decided to join forces with Clive again to bring a solution to the market, to the industry, that helps streamlining this communication about information need and what has to go into a project. So finally, not having to reinvent this wheel again and again, but bringing a simple solution that would kind of answer not only the LOD question, but the questions that typically come up on projects and has to be solved. So that's me. That's Ákos.
Yeah, hi. My name is Shivang, and I'm an architect by education. And I was always, construction and technology always had a very powerful impact on my mind since my education days. And I learned one of the BIM softwares when I was in college, and then I started exploring more. I would not say I never did building design. I did for quite a lot of time. I think for first 7 8 years of my career, I did both. I did technology also, and I did design also. In technology, my focus was always more on implementation, implementing BIM, making people aware about BIM processes in a right way. And what is the right BIM process, how they can benefit from BIM is still my core. I mean, software comes much later. Understanding what is BIM and what is the need, what is the vision, where do you want to reach with the BIM process? What is your BIM execution plan? What are you looking at? The output. What is your expectation from implementing BIM? All these things, all these areas attract me. And my another thing is I am a bit lazy kind of a person even today. Clive knows this. We had a long discussion on this. So I am a lazy person. So I always try to figure out that if anything, if going point A to B, if I can do it in 10 hours with, let's say, X amount of effort, I always look for processes, systems, technologies where next year I can go from A to B in 5 hours. So first thing, I'm saving time and one half X efforts. So that is what I always look for, that okay, saving time is one aspect of it, but it should reduce my efforts also from the entire process of going A to B. So yeah, this is what I look for. I keep looking for new challenges when it comes to technology, learn technology, think of new ways of developing something. So right now my brain is trying to think in a direction of developing something which is very important for my Indian fraternity of AEC industry. We'll talk about it later on in some other podcast. But yeah, this is what I do. And totally, I think we have divided in 3 seasons. So let's start discussing about introduction to BIM.
What is BIM? And that's the topic of today, is kind of helping people understand what BIM is. And
Yeah,
I was thinking that everyone sees in the movies the blueprints, and that's true for 99% of the construction jobs. There's drawings. Maybe they're not blue, but there are drawings that people have printed, and they're using them to construct on site. But most of the time, those drawings are created by people in offices, and lots of different teams in different offices, and they're created and then put together just before the start of the construction. And only when they start construction do they find lots of issues, lots of challenges, lots of problems, lots of discrepancies in all of those drawings. So enter BIM. And I think that you can jump all the way to that concept of digital twin, because I think in people's minds, the concept of digital twin makes sense. However, to describe what BIM is, I like this analogy. Imagine, instead of those people in office buildings everywhere dispersed around the world building the designs, imagine that they are in the same room virtually and also building the building with Lego blocks. And as they're building with Lego blocks, they can see what doesn't work and they can make corrections. And the architect could put in a window, a new specification of a window, and say, what about this window? And somebody might say, I don't like the color of that, or the size is too big. So they can make alterations, they can make updates to it. And there might be energy properties, data on that object, on that window, that they can run simulations and find out whether the window will perform in real life. And at the end of that building in virtual space using those Lego blocks, they can then slice the Lego building and get those blueprints, which will be much more feature rich and accurate and have all of those challenges, those clashes and discrepancies and missing information, all eradicated from the process. So that was my analogy of what is BIM. It's a team virtually building using Lego blocks and then creating a set of outputs, drawings usually, so that the team can have a better starting point in the construction project. What do you think of that?
I do like it. If you if you ask me, maybe the question was to Shivang, but I did like this analogy, especially because so you started talking about clash-free and coordinated kind of building that you can easily build, but then you also mentioned that you might want to replace a window, and the fun part is that you can replace a window easily in a Lego block, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's just fun replacing it. Likewise, it doesn't cost you anything if you do that early enough in the design phases and doing it in a virtual environment, opposed to having to replace a window or just move it a tiny bit in the construction site. That would be a huge cost effect and time delay. So yeah, it's much better to do it early enough in the design phase when it doesn't cost that much. Absolutely.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you my simple definition of BIM. I mean, I have always felt that construction industry is the only profession where you cannot create a digital prototype. You cannot test your product before actually start using it. So to me, BIM is something which allows you to create a digital prototype of your product, which is building actually. Drawings are just byproducts. Products for AEC industry, architecture, engineering, construction. Products for us is building or infrastructure or a bridge or MEP system or something. And we can actually have a prototype of it and then we realize that, oh, this fails and this works. So whatever fails, let's demolish it, and whatever works, let's building ahead. We can't do it. So to achieve this, I personally look at BIM as a digital prototyping tool or a technique where it allows me or us or professionals to do a digital prototyping before we actually create the building. So
Yep.
that is how I look at it.
I love that too, because who would buy the iPhone if it was the first one that they created? Not the how many thousand times do they digitally prototype and then they actually, that's the difference as well, is in construction, it's difficult to build that full scale prototype without BIM, because on the construction site, imagine if you were building the Burj Khalifa and you were saying, okay, we're going to prototype this. So we're going to build one of these buildings just as a test case before we build the real one. Obviously, you can't do that at scale. You have to do it in the computer, and that's what you're able to do with BIM. Is it's a one-to-one digital replica. So this kind of concept of a digital twin, a real, actually, this is what the building will look like, what it will, how big it will be, what types of materials it will have, what properties they have, what dependencies between them, the window and the doors and the walls, understanding how it all fits together. Yeah, absolutely. And I would hate to think what the iPhone would look like if they hadn't been able to digitally prototype and also mock up. So that's the other part. For building information modeling, you can create really detailed mock-ups of specific technical complex areas of a building before you go and make it, and get to the level of fabrication to understand exactly the nuts, the bolts, the welds, the joins, how pieces are going to come together, even down to layers of membranes and materials and waterproofing and things like that, to really understand it before you go and build it. Yep. So go on.
Another example is, will you drive a car which was never prototyped or tested? I mean, if a car manufacturer tells you that I am best, I know the best car and I have designed best cars. Yes, you have. But then with the complexity and the mechanism and the new technologies involved, they will have to create a prototype. Even the first car manufacturer might have created a prototype and tested it. And it is even more necessary now. So I always equate it with automobile, because apart from architecture and technology, automobile is what my crazy, liking hobby is. So I always equate with the automobile that imagine in today's world you are driving so fast. So basically your mode of transport is increasing in speed. There is a lot of technology involved, lot of ADAS, lot of predictive technology about possible crashes, or your car is actually reading signages and giving you live inputs. Now imagine driving such a complex car which is never tested, and there has been no prototype for such car. What will happen? I mean, will you feel confident about sitting in that car and driving that car? So this is another thing. Like for AEC industry, this BIM is actually giving confidence to not only us professionals but our end users also. If we explain it that way, if we tell them that guys, we have tested it, we know it that this is going to work because we have checked it, tested it. So this is another way of looking at it.
Yep. I'm a big Formula One fan, and I imagine a season where they weren't prototyping and weren't testing, because you imagine that being the result. If nobody had a chance to prototype and test beforehand, there would be a massive difference in the times. People would be beating them by minutes probably. Well, with Max Verstappen, it sometimes feels like minutes, but the principle is that you can build a prototype, put it in a wind tunnel, and test the aerodynamics and understand how that car might perform, what sort of drag and what sort of downforce, and understanding how you can build something and then even simulate it in real, before you go in real life and use it. So I love the concept of prototyping. I remember in design technology classes where we'd have to design something, We then have to build some prototypes of it before we went and built the real thing. Most of the time it was a product. And so people kind of, liken that process and understand that process from products. But when you think about design and construction, it's very easy to miss that step because it's simple to dig a hole in the ground, put some reinforcement in and put some concrete in. Everyone can do that, can't they? But as we think about that principle and as we think about building something that permanent, obviously anything that goes wrong, any piece of concrete that goes in the wrong place, it's not very easy to rectify. It's not easy to fix it after that. So if you think about this prototyping and you think about some of the challenges involved in creating those prototypes, can you think of anything that you would see in as people are building these prototypes that might be some challenges even if it was digitally built?
I do have some good examples for prototypes. Maybe not bad examples, but starting with some good ones. So I was working on a hospital. That was well, I have to say, unfortunately, that was almost, I think, or even more than 15 years ago. And that hospital had the metal panels on. And in that case, actually, they did have physical mock-ups as well on the site, which is, of course, just a small piece of the building. And in that small area, all the metal panels nicely fit on the building. But then the owner decided to give it a try and prototype it and see it in the virtual environment. And as we were putting on the metal panels based on the shop drawings, so we were fabricating each and every metal panel as they're supposed to look like on the site, and putting them virtually on the building, we had to find out that actually most of them wouldn't fit. So we had to report it to the team. It was already in construction. We had to report it to the contractor, to the subcontractor, to the owner, to the architect. That was a huge all the teams involved. And they decided to stop the installations and redesign all the metal panels. So that was a huge thing back then, putting almost the constructions to a stop for a certain period in time. But in return, what they found out is that they were actually ending up saving a lot of time, months of construction and installation and prefabrication and millions of dollars, more than 1.5 million or something like that, because of being able to identify these issues early enough, not having to redo any of the panels, but actually redesigning and fabricating them right in the first place. And of course, that's not only time saving, cost saving, but also a much better quality, because all those panels that were fabricated in the shop, they were up to the high standards. So windproofing and waterproofing and everything were really fine. So I still love that example, even though it goes back 15 years ago. And actually, so talking about return of investment for a second as well. So it did have a cost, of course, but remembering seeing those physical mock-ups on site, I recall that our services actually that we did for all this high return, they costed less than the physical mock-up on site. So yeah, I still love that example. You might remember, Clive, because we were sharing that project.
Well, I can attest to that, and that hospital project is actually only like a couple of miles down the road from where I am right now. So yeah,
it's good to see that project still. Yeah,
it's a beautiful project. It reminds me of that time, constantly as I go past it. And that's a very technical example. And everyone might think, well, yes, on the most complex projects, maybe you should use this new 3D modeling, building information modeling technique to find these issues and to uncover these challenges. But what about on smaller projects? And I have an example, I think probably 15, 20 years ago as well, the same sort of thing, where a team was challenging us to see whether there was a return on investment on a very small project. And this one was just dig a hole in the middle of a road and put a box culvert in with an outlet and a manhole and an access set of steps down. So it was like literally a few different components. And we built this in 3D. And because we built it in 3D, we could find that the manhole cover was not located in the right place in this precast concrete slab. And they would not be able to use it due to health and safety reasons, because the step irons to get into the shaft, into this box, were just in the wrong location. So what they would have had to do is stop everything. They would have had this big hole in the middle of the road, and they would just put the top on, and it wouldn't have worked. And they would have had to then have another precast concrete panel made, and it had to be cured. It had to dry for a long time. So it would have had days, if not weeks, delay and massive impact just because of that small coordination problem on a very small project. So yeah, using 3D can uncover so many challenges, and it's not just on small or big projects, it's on every project if you're using it correctly.
I also have example of one of the residential projects that we worked on. I mean, almost a decade ago, so 10 years back. And we, specifically decided that apart from architecture, we will model MEP also, and especially ventilation ducts, air conditioned ducts. And the reason was because it was a higher end residential place. It was for two brothers on a huge plot of land, but they had a dedicated, amenities like dedicated recreational facilities for just the two houses on that plot. And then there were a lot of air conditioning ducts were coming from the terrace because they placed air handling unit on the terrace. And then they wanted to get into their, there was a clubhouse, there was a banquet hall for their parties, and a mini theater for 25 people. And a lot of ducts were coming from the gap between beam and wall, I mean, basically. And then all of a sudden, one of the family members decided that we want to go submerged. We don't want to keep our entire clubhouse out. When people see from the road, they should see only the two houses and not the recreational facilities. So design got changed, and we went, all of a sudden we went -3 meters. So now you're just seeing the upper part and just hiding the AHU unit, and then entire recreational facility went in the process of this, because we modeled the ducts for AC, it helped us a lot. It saved us from having a clash with the beam itself. Because now, when we were going deeper by 3 meters, our entire beam layout changed. The structural engineer changed everything because he wanted a different types of beams with different depth. So, without even, I can't even think that if that was not done, architecture and MEP both in BIM, that project would have suffered a lot. I mean, the client and everyone on the site would have suffered a lot because we were actually heading to a clash, and a clash, not, I mean, the clash between air conditioning duct and beam. So it is like a serious kind of a clash, and we would not have been able to visualize. And it also helped us to communicate the same clash in 3D, to our structural consultant, that this is the situation we are facing. So do you suggest to reduce beam depth, or can you do something with beam depth, or what you suggest? So we all stakeholders could come together and take a decision, and we actually designed that situation, I mean the new situation, with the help of both the consultants. So yeah, it is an important aspect, no matter what type of the project we are talking about.
And the examples we're talking about are how we use software to build something digitally and find issues and resolve them collaboratively. So is BIM software, Shivang? Is that BIM equals software? Is that like...
I would never call BIM a software. If in fact, I always tell this with my friends and my industry people back in India, that if anybody comes and tells you that this software is BIM and BIM is this software, then that person knows nothing about BIM. The moment people equate software with the word BIM, I mean, see, I explain this in a very simple term, that I want to go from Mumbai to Pune. Let's say there are two cities, Mumbai to Pune. Now, this entire my intent to reach Pune can be achieved by going by a train, a bus, by road, my own car. I can walk, I can cycle to Pune, I can go on a motorbike. All these things can be done, but the purpose is to reach Pune. So for me, BIM is that yes, I want to reach Pune, but then which direction, I mean, which mode of transport I choose, that's just a small part of going to Pune. It's not the entire exercise, It's, and then You are also traveling to Pune. We have, let's say, we all are meeting some customer in Pune. So you both are also traveling. So you will have different mode of transport. Again, the idea is not what mode of transport we choose. The idea is to reach Pune. That is the purpose. So the purpose is, I mean, BIM, you can have your mode of transport. Akash can have his mode of transport. I can have my own mode of transport. And one of other friend who is also joining us, let's say Toral can have her own mode of transport. So that doesn't mean that all of us are not doing BIM or doing BIM. We all come together and achieve this task of having a digital prototype using
Yep.
various modes. That is BIM.
Love it. So if BIM's not software, Akash, what is BIM? How would you describe BIM in a word if it's not software?
In a word, well, you
Yeah.
give me the million dollar question. Lots of debates going on about it and what is BIM, what is not BIM. I'm going to give you a long answer actually instead of a short answer. But we were talking about now a lot of coordination and 3D modeling, pretty much, and I'm sure that many of the audience would be saying that, well, that's not BIM, that's just coordination, that's just 3D modeling. And I have to disagree because I think any kind of information that goes into the project, that is information that we have to manage. And let's take a use case when you only create, let's say, only create the models for visualization, for marketing purposes, because you want to sell a building, you want to sell houses. That's a use case as well. And you have to make lots of decisions. You have to make decisions about colors. And well, it could be red, but if you want to be more specific about it, you call out a certain code of what that red is. So all of a sudden, you have to manage information. So all this have to be stored somehow, and what we have been talking about is a nice visualization of a database that is running behind. Databases again can be all the different kinds of databases, even linked databases. And that's BIM is something that helps you understanding and for the humans visualizing all this data. But again, it's a huge amount of information that has to be managed. So trying to answer your question, what BIM is, it is processes, it is a methodology, how we are approaching our projects, how we are designing and collaborating on projects. And well, that was not your question, but my wish actually is I think we all reach a certain kind of milestone and some of our targets if we stop talking about actually BIM, because that would mean that we just do our daily jobs, which is designing buildings and building buildings in a certain way, and what best serves our needs. And if we can stop talking about BIM, that means that all this information is managed properly by all the teams. We seamlessly manage to work together and coordinate, not necessarily the building, but coordinate our processes and workflows together. So did I answer the question? Probably not, but it was a long answer at least.
So if you said if we stop talking about BIM, maybe this podcast stops. I don't know. Like, oh,
This podcast will stop.
It's an amazing analogy that Akash gave. What I'm trying to tell you is that he's exactly right. That we breathe every day. We don't talk. We don't do podcast on breathing. We breathe. So it should be as natural as
there
that.
are there are podcasts on breathing as well.
So then,
But
then we'll be doing podcast on what is the right way of breathing,
yeah,
instead of importance of breathing. Right now, we are doing podcast on importance of breathing. The idea is we should do podcast on what is the right approach to breathe correctly and breathe deep. What is the quality of breathing? That
yep,
should be the approach. Right now,
yeah.
we are doing this to tell everyone that breathing is important.
I loved. So I thought I was teeing it up for a very short answer that BIM is a process rather than software. But you put it so well and described that the process of design and construction, but with essentially the right tool at the right time for the right reasons, and making sure that you're creating data information for the right team members. And BIM essentially is a better way of doing it. I like the description of a better information management. So a way of really understanding what needs to happen, who needs to do it, when it needs to happen, and combining the processes of BIM and lean into today's world to just make it better, make it easier, more simple, make it actually value add at every step of the way. And yeah, if we can just describe design and construction workflows as processes that are enabled by, yes, pieces of software at different places in that. But as Shivang says, yeah, BIM is not software. BIM is process and really about betterment of that workflow in AEC for our project. So, okay, so we've talked about like what BIM is, and we've talked about the process of actually putting it in place. There must still be challenges. Sorry, I was jumping to that earlier. There must
I'm
still
coming
be
to that.
challenges. It can't be
I'm
easy.
coming to that.
Okay.
Why do you think that there is still not enough adoption of BIM or enough understanding of BIM? Why do you think? What is the reason?
Oh, Akash, why do you think? Okay, I can tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
If you were going to jump in, go for it.
No, I mean, I have one idea why it is hard to why we see these challenges. I think it's a problem when it comes to scaling. So I've seen lots of pilot projects, for example. I have dozens of examples that I maybe later on I can share with you how successful pilot projects we could make. But that meant that we had a good group of people who understood a certain reason and purpose why they are doing certain kind of approaches. So why they are doing BIM on that project. They clearly defined what they wanted to achieve and then set different kind of stepping stones to get there. Also including using software technologies for getting there. And these pilot projects are typically successful because the right brains are coming together to make it happen. But when it comes to scaling, now that at a certain point we have to agree on how do we do scaling. Also talking about software solutions, so maybe at that point it is becoming really reasonable to talk about what kind of software we are using, because eventually it is in a virtual environment in the digital space which does require software solutions. So how are we going to communicate, how these applications are going to communicate? Plus, on the top of all of this, we also have to start introducing business models and business reasons of investing into a digital workflow in order to see this return of investment and see the value of our project. So that's one of maybe the challenges among many other, I guess.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, it's a challenge. Change is a challenge. I think when the industry is set up contractually almost against improvement, then that becomes a challenge. So I love the image. I love and hate the image of the yacht next to the dinghy, where the dinghy is called original contract and the yacht, the huge yacht, is called change order. And the principle behind that is that you can win a project on a small bid, and then because of the amount of change and the complexity in these projects, every change you can add on and add more money to your contract and essentially get a big profit from that project. And that principle is contracted into our buildings, into our design and construction process. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because we are not incentivized as teams to come together and solve problems to improve and reduce cost, improve the project and reduce cost. We are actually contracted to come together to give a fixed price for a fixed set of requirements most of the time. And therefore, we are not incentivized to actually implement improvements like building information modeling. So I believe that is one of the biggest and unfortunately one of the hardest things to change. We do see a lot of IPD, integrated project delivery mechanisms, that are helping teams to come together earlier. And those teams are always, I think, 90% of the time are using advanced methods because everyone wants to improve the bottom line because they get a share of the profits. So that principle of contracting for and improvement is key. And then our industry is very traditional, let's say. So I've been in design and construction for 30 years, and my feeling has always been that if it works, why change it? That's what I get from our industry. Why should we change anything? I go and bid a project, I build it, I get paid for it, and then I do it again. And I think that that's one of the biggest, unfortunately, complacencies in the industry. If it works, don't if it's not broke, don't fix it.
True,
Shivang?
true. And would you also consider or take in account the fear of unknown? Because what I feel is there is a lot of time there is fear of unknown because there is a lot of wrong knowledge, or I would say no knowledge of BIM. I mean, wrong knowledge is not even the right term. What is wrong knowledge? There is nothing like wrong knowledge. It's knowledge or no knowledge. So I would say majority of the time I have seen that the knowledge is lacking about BIM. Like the core knowledge. Most of the times people are fed that BIM is a software is BIM, or most of the times they are fed that you should use this only on large projects. Most of the times they are fed that they know it. They have some idea about it that this can be used on this kind of projects and not this kind of projects. And I'm doing this kind of project, so I'm not in need of this. Or sometimes they feel that okay, I mean I have come across these kind of examples where they just feel that okay, yeah, I invested in a software license and we are doing it. But then when you realize, I mean, when you see and when you go deeper in the conversation or you look at the word, you realize that it's not BIM, it's just a 3D model. It's just because the software allows to cut a section and you see section coming out of your plan or 3D, it's not BIM. There is no information and there is I is completely missing. It's just a smart 3D model. So I see all these things put together, there is a lot of unclear ideas about BIM, about what is actually the BIM benefit. Let's say today, if I mean, I'll just throw two examples at both of you just for the conversation. Imagine there is an office of 5 people. Will they benefit switching to BIM? And there is an office of 100 people. Will they benefit on switching to BIM? And out of these two, which one will benefit more? Let's say these kind of question you are thrown up. What is your take on this?
Well, I would say the benefit is to whom, and I think that that's one of the challenges is there's an industry that says BIM is a better way for the whole entire project, but is BIM a better way for a specific team, one team? So you take that example where there's two different teams, architects that are creating drawings today. And if they were to implement BIM in their offices, there would be disruption. There would be training. There would be loss of productivity for that first part. There would be mistakes potentially. There would be liability that they would be worried about, challenged. And so they have to ask themselves, what's in it for me? And maybe the benefits don't necessarily align so well. And therefore, in your example of is it better for a smaller team versus a larger team, there's lots of other variables in that question as well. I would say in the end, the smaller team would be way more productive and could do potentially the same amount of work, maybe, as a larger team. And to get there, it's going to be less disruptive and less of a learning curve because there's a smaller number of people. So yes, I think that it's more difficult to implement building information modeling in larger companies with existing processes and workflows and people that are already trained in ways of doing things than it is going to be for a smaller team. But ultimately, the larger team would benefit more. They are obviously at a larger scale, but it obviously there's lots of different nuanced parts of that question. I don't know whether that was answering your question or not.
No, it answers one part of my question, and I'll tell you why this came up because This morning I was, going through LinkedIn feed, and there was a discussion going on that because AI is coming, and what will happen? Will AI replace architects or designers, or what will be the ultimate outcome? So that ignited some thoughts in my mind, and I just realized that AI will not replace architects, but AI will replace architects who cannot use technology in a right way.
Yeah.
So AI is not going to replace architects or designers. Nobody can take away design from you. No AI can take away design from you, but AI can take away, I mean, or rather, AI is a challenging if you don't know how to use AI to present and execute your designs faster. And then I was reading a quote by Steve Jobs that thoughts, ideas are nothing. They are just talks. Implementation is what matters. I mean, something like this. I don't remember the exact quote, but Steve Jobs said something like this, that an idea without execution carries no value.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I
the
was,
idea is 1% and the execution is 99% for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, something like that. So I was
And,
I was connecting these two things, that probably use of technology and use of better tools will allow designers to have that 99% of better execution of their powerful idea.
yep.
This is what I wanted to discuss.
And you were saying about AI there. I love the concept. AI is not going to replace your role, your job. It's not going to replace you, but somebody using AI will. So it's like that realization of I need to understand technology. I need to understand processes that use BIM, and I need to be able to leverage AI in that combination to enhance what I'm doing today, and be more relevant, more productive, and create a better outcome, a better output.
True, true, true.